discussing Pieter Abbeel's new podcast, Robot Brains. He started the second season. He invited Sergey Levine. In my opinion, Robot Brains is the most important podcast out there as far as where technology is going, and in particular for hedge fund managers that are interested in technology. I'm going to elaborate on this. It's about self-supervised reinforcement learning. It's about techniques in reinforcement learning. In my opinion, this is the next level of AI. This is, in the words of Sergey Levine, instead of pattern recognition machines, we want to build behavioral machines, machines that behave in a certain way. And this is a fundamental difference that I think will change the world even more than the pattern-seeking AI has done in the last 10 years. This is the Not Even Wrong podcast. It's January 7th, 2022. This is Krim Delco. Since the last update, we're down roughly 11%. We are now down for the year 4.1%. The market's down 1.5%. We're underperforming by 2.6%. We had a massive reversal in the last couple of days. We went from up 13% on day one of this year to down 4.1%. And when I say about embracing volatility and living with it and accepting it and all these things, this is what I mean. It's tough. It's there's not much to say here. It's like a gut punch by the market. The reason this is happening is rates are going up, growth stocks are, people are rotating out of growth stocks into value stocks. All of these things have been going on even before this year started. It's accelerating now. Our opinion is that in the long run, which means 3 to 6 months from now, long-term rates will not go much higher. They will not even see a 2. So we will see the 10-year treasury still in the 1 point something range. And that this whole reversal will reverse again because it is fundamentally not justified. Maybe technically, maybe valuations, maybe Wall Street lingo can justify this type of stuff for a couple of months. But fundamentally, the businesses that are generating value are going to keep generating value. Rates are going to stay low and people will invest in high growth stocks. So now let's talk about the podcast. Pieter Abbeel had Sergey Levine in his first episode of the second season, and they were talking about self-supervised reinforcement learning. In particular, Levine introduced a new concept which is called offline reinforcement learning. It's not new in an academic concept, but it's new to me, and I think it's new also, relatively new in the academic world. What is offline reinforcement learning? Let's just lean back for a second and let's set the stage. What is reinforcement learning? Reinforcement learning, the way I think most people understand it is, it's kind of like how you train your dog. The dog does something, you give him a reward. The dog does something you don't want him to do, you don't give him the reward, or maybe you punish him. I have a cat at home. She sometimes pees on my rug. I yell at her. I clap my hands. I scare her. Things like that. And then when after a few days she doesn't pee on that rug again, I try to give her treats. Although with cats it's a little bit difficult to understand what they really want and what not. But not the concept is, in real time you're rewarding good behavior and you're punishing bad behavior. This is reinforcement learning, sort of 101. Now, what Levine is introducing is offline reinforcement learning, which is not real time in the sense that I'm having my dog on my walk and I'm rewarding him right while he's doing things. Offline is, I have data from the past and I use that data in a way that I can then run a reinforcement learning algorithm on that data and use the data as a sort of guideline, or like in Levine's words, as a behavioral machine. So instead of pattern-seeking machines, which is sort of AI 101, the whole machine learning, the way it was taught by people like Andrew Ng, and then the ImageNet challenge that was so successful in 2012, and all these things were pattern-seeking machines. Now we're looking at a behavioral machine, so a machine that generates behavior. So in other words, you develop a reward function, and then you run the data against that reward function. Whenever whenever the reward function is positive, then the machine learns that maybe that's what they should be doing based on the data that the machine is reading. and then when the data shows something where the reward function shows negative, then the machine learns that they shouldn't be doing that. So this is in a nutshell the way I understand it. So the difference between offline reinforcement learning and real-time reinforcement learning is simply that instead of having the dog walking with you and you're giving the dog treats when they do something right, you use data from the past and you then somehow run the system. Now, this is technically not so easy. Levine says that in his talk with Abbeel. So there's certainly some problems in terms of how to actually do that technically, and I don't want to go into those techniques, but I think in general, the way we think about reinforcement learning on capital partners is that this is the future in particular for instantiated robots. So for real-time AI, as Elon Musk calls it, like self-driving cars, robots, those types of things will need a big chunk of reinforcement learning in order to really succeed. Now, this offline reinforcement learning is actually very encouraging because we were, of course, debating how can you do reinforcement learning with a car, and the answer is it's kind of difficult because you can't let the car go out in the wild and kill people and then learn and all that. So with offline reinforcement learning, you could potentially use the data that Tesla has, the massive amounts of data from driving millions of miles with people using their autopilot or also shadow mode. So basically what Tesla is doing is massive at-scale monitoring of how people drive, use that data and then run a sort of a reward function, a reinforcement learning algorithm against that and teach the car how to drive. So this is a new way of, I think, thinking about reinforcement learning. I think it's interesting. I'm very encouraged. I think, like I said several times on this podcast before, Tesla needs to embrace self-supervised reinforcement learning in one way or the other. I think just patent seeking is not going to do it. And I think that's this work that is being done at Berkeley with Abbeel and Levine and other people, I think is really revolutionary when it comes to not just AI, but in particular reinforcement learning. And therefore, we encourage Tesla to look into this. Hopefully, they will embrace it. And hopefully, we will hear in the next couple of months the word self-supervised reinforcement learning, offline reinforcement learning. Those are the kinds of things that we expect Tesla to embrace because they're the best positioned company to take advantage of these new techniques. Number one, they have the data. Number two, they have the software culture. Number three, they have this pivoting culture. So they, even though they've been doing something maybe this way, now they can do it that way and learn from other people and do this type of transfer learning, which in our view is very, very important when it comes to these fast-moving subjects such as AI and self-supervised reinforcement learning. I think also another really important part of this whole equation is the reward function. I think we underestimate that. The reward function is, in other words, how do you design an algorithm that does, that teaches the machine exactly to do what you want the machine to do. And this is the crux of the reward function. Because if you have the data and the reward function, then by definition, the machine will learn from that data using the reward function to know what is right and wrong, and then slowly learn how to actually behave. And if the reward function is designed well, you will get the behavior that is according to what you want. And if the reward function is not designed well, you will have a problem. I mean, this is of course in the self-driving car industry is a very prevalent situation. For example, what do you want the car to do when there's rain? You want the car to slow down, so you reward the car for slowing down when there's rain. What do you want the car to do when visibility is not very good? You want the car to slow down, maybe even stop, say, look, I can't drive, it's too dangerous. But what if there is, let's say, danger around you? Should the car still stop, or how do you define the reward function in that context? So this is just one example on top of my head, and there's many more examples. So the real world is much more complex, and therefore we believe that there's still a lot of work to do, but this is the path to go. And before I end this episode, I just want to mention another thing which wasn't discussed as much in the Abbeel Levine podcast, but to my surprise, which is the concept of animation. Now, animation has a bit of a bad rap because animation, the way we've been doing it in the past, has always been sort of hard coding humans designing an environment, like in a game engine, for example, and then hope somehow let the machine live through that virtual environment, and then we can play games, we can learn stuff. But the problem, like Elon Musk said, is that we cannot simulate nature. Nature is way too complex. and therefore we need real-world applications to go in the real world and learn from nature. In other words, nature is the model that we run our models against, and we can't animate the model. The model is nature, and we should take it at face value. Now, what we could do, though, and this was one of the things that I really got excited about a couple of months ago, is the concept of transformers. So maybe we can learn from nature how to animate nature in a sort of machine learning way, like the same way we can use transformers to write text and understand language much better. Maybe we can also use transformers to animate videos much better. My example is always the icy road in Alaska. I take a picture of an icy road in Alaska, and I run something like DALL-E or some sort of next version, DALL-E 2.0, 3.0, against that picture, and it gives me 100 million or a billion versions of that icy road in Alaska. One is in the ice is really icy, the other one it's not as icy. Then there's a wolf on the road, there's a bear, there's somebody dead, there's a serial killer walking on the road. All these a billion versions of that icy road, and then my car can run a billion versions, and I can run a self-supervised reinforcement learning algorithm against those billions of versions of that icy road, and then the car can learn how to drive on that icy road with all these potential conflicts happening. So if we extrapolate this to the future, we could say that basically what I'm saying is that we could maybe animate reality in a way that is as good, if not even better than nature, because we have more computation power than, or we can allocate more computational power to different scenarios. And maybe nature is doing that also with the multiverse, but we, since we're only in a very small part of the multiverse, and basically there's one multiverse that we perceive, we don't see all the others, so therefore we also have a lot less compute power we need a lot less compute power to understand this part of the multiverse, versus in our experiment with DALL-E, we could run many multiverses, maybe potentially billions of multiverses with billions of different types of worlds, and one of them could be also, let's say, the Harry Potter world, where things happen that are really unlikely, but they do happen, and therefore the car and the self-supervised reinforcement learning algorithm can actually learn even things that nature doesn't throw at us, or very rarely throws at us. In other words, if we could find a way to animate nature in a automated way, in a machine learning type of way, like a la DALL-E or transformers, we could then use animation to run self-supervised reinforcement algorithms against that, and then hopefully get much better driving. Actually driving that is not just as good as humans, but way better than humans, in a very similar way like AlphaGo Zero was able to play a lot better Go than humans would play, because the machine started doing things that humans would never even have thought about. And this is something that also Sergey Levine said. One of his goals, his dreams, is to come up with a machine that does things that humans wouldn't even have thought about. And this, I think, is the holy grail of self-supervised reinforcement learning and AI with robots. And I think if we can achieve that, we will not just have a much better transportation system, we will also generate massive amounts of wealth, because the implications of that, of course, would be huge. We would have a lot less traffic jams, accidents, death, people would save a lot of time with driving. All these things are just immensely positive. So to summarize, Pieter Abbeel, new season. His first interview was with Sergey Levine. Very important, in our opinion, the most important podcast right now, because it is talking about self-supervised reinforcement learning, new techniques of self-supervised reinforcement learning, which from our point of view is sort of machine learning 2.0 or AI 2.0. It is the next level where actually physical systems like robots can learn and become a lot better than humans could ever conceive them. Thank you.